The sound of tires tearing into the pavement snapped me upright. And when I looked out the window, there it was again. The shiny blue SUV crooked across my driveway like it owned the place, like I was the one trespassing on my own concrete. My phone was already in my hand before the anger even landed because my wife was inside doubled over and breathing hard, and we didn't have the luxury of neighbor drama today. She was in labor. I texted, I called. I pounded on the door, but the porch stayed quiet. The SUV sat there grinning at me with its dumb chrome smile, and something in me just clicked. I dialed a tow, told the dispatcher it was an emergency, and the little bit of relief that washed over me when he said, 10 minutes, man, you know what I mean? And, the truck rolled up faster than Hope Big Guy at the wheel, who took one look at the blockade and said like he'd seen this movie 100 times. She do this often. I pointed jaw tight and he nodded like a doctor confirming a diagnosis, hooked the SUV in 3 clean motions, chains clinking like justice. Wheels lifted, my pulse finally dropped half a beat, and that's when the front door flew open. Karen burst out in a robe and fury, screaming about rules and rights and HOA jurisdiction, as if that acronym gave her a badge. The driver didn't even blink. Once it's on the truck, ma'am, it's gone. And the horn nudged her back when she tried to play roadblock with a belt tie and bare feet. Neighbors cracked blinds, a couple stepped onto porches, and old George across the street muttered loud enough for the birds to hear, "About time." When the truck pulled away, Karen threw a look that could have curdled fresh milk. "This isn't over," she hissed. And for a second I felt that thin wire of dread tugging behind my ribs. But my wife cried out from the doorway, hand on the frame, tears in her eyes from the contraction and the panic, and that settled it. I jumped in the backup sedan we keep on the street and tore out of there. Hours later, after the white walls and the monitors and the blur of nurses and breath counts and my fingers nearly breaking in her grip, our daughter cried her way into the world. For a few hours, everything ugly fell away. Then I drove home and found a barricade, actual trash cans, lumber caution tape stacked across my driveway like a low-budget castle wall with a hand-painted sign that said, "Private property, do not enter." Karen sipped from a mug on her porch like a queen who'd just annexed a kingdom. "Nice driveway," she called. "Shame if something kept it blocked." That was the moment I decided the line had been crossed, not just by a wheel or a bumper, but by whatever mean little engine inside her that ran on control. The next morning, between diaper changes and coffee that tasted like cardboard, I started calling tow company, HOA office, city code enforcement, anybody with a clipboard or a badge. I reported the obstruction. I filed a complaint. I pulled permits I didn't need just to make sure my corners were square. And then the world tilted sideways again. My old sedan, the one I'd driven to the hospital, vanished from the curb. No street signs, no sweepers, nothing. I canvassed the block with a heartbeat in my throat until George told me he'd seen Karen pointing at my car the night before while talking to a tow driver, and the blood in my face felt like it had been replaced by ice water. I called the police, of course. The officer on the phone was sympathetic but cautious. Get evidence, camera footage, witnesses, anything that moves this from suspicion to fact. Copy that. I installed cameras like I was wiring a bank doorbell, garage corners, alley sightlines, an owl-shaped bird feeder that could pass for decor but recorded in crisp audio and video. The first night just after midnight, the feeder cam caught her on the driveway, checking her barricade with a flashlight, whispering into her phone, "He's mad, don't worry, the car's long gone, he'll never see it again." I brought that clip to the station and watched the officer's eyebrows climb, but he still said the word that makes decent people feel insane more. So I kept my head down and my lens up. When the HOA called an emergency meeting, I showed up to find Karen at the head of the table like a game show host flipping the script with a straight face. She accused me of harassment, illegal tows being a threat to community peace. I let her run, then played the clip of her whispering over my driveway, like a cat burglar who wanted credit. The room gasped, phones angled toward me for once, and Paul, another HOA regular with the smile of a man who loves the word bylaws, tried to wave it off. "That doesn't prove anything," he said, and I smiled without humor. "Give it a minute," I told him. Because that night someone cut my backyard gate and smashed the garage window, and while the police found nothing but muddy footprints, my inside camera caught a shadow slipping away. The next morning, Karen waved at me from the porch like we were neighbors again. All dimples. Rough night. Yeah, that happened. Let me back up a sec and tell you what broke whatever patience I had left. A broken mirror from her blue SUV in my grass, and a dent in my fence the size of a bumper. Evidence likes to bring friends, my lawyer said when I called him, so I went hunting for them. At the tow yard, the owner hands like sandpaper, and a memory like a ledger pulled footage of the night my sedan vanished. There she was, Karen, in plain view, paying cash and signing a piece of paper with my license plate printed right on it like a victory poster. I left with a copy and a headache and the kind of satisfaction that tastes like metal. A couple nights later, the quiet went weird. Two guys I didn't recognize stood on Karen's lawn with her whispering and pointing. One held a crowbar like a question mark. I called the police. They cruised past, and she pretended to water plants at midnight. When they left, the night reset like a bad dream. And then the next evening, a boom, like a movie explosion, rattled the street. Her blue SUV was on fire, flames licking the night sky, Karen shrieking that I'd done it, while Greg, the HOA president with the posture of a traffic cone, announced they'd be fining me for destruction of community property. I laughed probably louder than I should have, with the smell of burning rubber in my nose and my neighbors filming everything like it was the 4th of July. Morning came, and with it the feed from my front camera, two hooded figures dousing the SUV, one leaning into Karen's open car window for a quick chat before they lit the fuse and sprinted. Insurance scam frame job. Both take your pick. I sent the video to my lawyer, the police, a few neighbors I trust, and George watched with that slow, sad nod men use when life keeps confirming their worst beliefs. "She's cooked," he said, and I wanted to agree. Instead, my shed got broken into, tools vanished, and when I sprinted into the yard with a flashlight, I swear I caught the gleam of something in Karen's hand at the fence line before she melted into the dark. So I set a different kind of trap: quiet, patient, boring. Karen's not patient. She plays to the crowd. A few nights later, I caught two figures dumping nails and broken glass across my driveway, and when I picked through the mess, I came up with a silver bracelet engraved KW. You can't make that up. I bagged it, photographed it, tucked it next to the USB I carried like a talisman. Meanwhile, she filed noise complaints because our baby cried at night, called the city about my fence height, stacked junkers in front of my house, and swore they were visitors. I recorded everything. Bullies count on you to snap so they can point and say, "See, I didn't snap." The HOA finally caved to spectacle and scheduled a community hearing, and the place packed out like a talent show. Karen wore her best armor, and Greg looked like he wanted to be anywhere else. They gave me the floor, and I plugged in the USB. Karen whispering about my long-gone sedan. Karen coordinating the SUV fire. Karen sprinkling my driveway with hardware like she was seeding a new crop. Gasps swung against the walls. A few people actually clapped, which was weird and a little perfect, and Greg, sweating through his golf shirt, suspended her from the board on the spot. She left in a tantrum that rattled the blinds. That should have been the end. Instead, at 3 a.m., a tow tried to lift my wife's car, and by the grace of a rusty chain, it rolled backward and crushed Karen's rose bushes and kissed her porch post hard enough to make the whole street say, "Whoa." Police lights cuffs a ride to the station. As they put her in the car, she leaned out and said, clear as a bell, "You think you've won? Mark, watch what happens to your car next." Bail is a magician. Now you see them, now you don't. By noon, Karen was back. She parked a black sedan in front of my home like a stage prop and revved it whenever I stepped out, called me names that would get a teenager grounded, and announced to anyone walking a dog that the HOA would throw me out. I waved and smiled and watered my lawn, and at 2 in the morning she tried to light that same sedan from underneath while whispering into her phone, "The insurance will pay double this time." No cameras. Except there were cameras, and I called the cops before the match even hit the pan. They seized the car. She screamed fraud. And a day later, I found a letter in my mailbox. No stamp, red ink. "You may have taken my car, but I'll take your life." I don't rattle easily, but that rattled me. The police took it seriously. Patrols stepped up, and still the sabotage kept coming. Spray paint over lenses, screws loosened on the porch railing like they wanted me to learn a lesson the hard way my wife followed at the grocery store while Karen hissed threats behind the cereal aisle. So I upgraded the whole perimeter floodlights, better cams a dog with a bark like thunder. And when the fire took my shed 3 nights later, one of those new hidden cameras watched Karen slip into my yard with a gas can and sprint out empty-handed. Warrant arrest fingerprints on the canned documents in her house that smelled like insurance games and retaliation. Even a stash of parts from my old sedan that clicked together with my case like Lego. And still, somehow, she made bail again. Men in suits carried boxes out of her house at dawn, and Greg knocked on my door looking like he'd aged a decade overnight. "She's out," he said. "She's furious." No kidding. The next morning, a silver SUV I didn't recognize was parked half on my lawn with the window smashed out and the words "Your neck" slashed down the side. My wife tightened her grip on our baby. I took photos, called it in, and told my lawyer we were done playing defense. He got us a court date. "She'll try something big before then," he warned. He wasn't wrong. She always tried something big. Court felt like the storm finally breaking. Karen strutted in wearing a suit that probably cost more than my first car and tried to represent herself like the rules were beneath her. The judge sat granite still while her accusations bounced around the room: harassment, vandalism, psychological warfare, and then my attorney pressed play. Clip after clip after clip, a parade of her worst impulses in high definition. Greg admitted from the stand that she'd abused her role and intimidated people for years. Paul sank into his chair like he wanted to evaporate. When I spoke, I kept it simple. My wife and I wanted to be left alone to raise our kid and mow our grass and not have our driveway turned into a hobby horse for someone's control issues. "I didn't fight with violence," I said. "I documented. I followed the rules she waved around like a weapon. And I'm asking the court to make them mean something." Karen melted down halfway through. She shouted conspiracy, accused the judge of bias, pointed at me, and promised ruin for everyone I've ever loved. Which, pro tip, is not a winning strategy. The gavel cracked the air. The verdict came down like clean rain restitution fines, restraining order removal from any HOA authority, and her vehicle impounded and auctioned to cover damages. Out in the lot, a tow hooked her last car while neighbors watched from the sidewalk, pretending not to watch, and I stood next to my wife with our daughter tucked against my chest, breathing for what felt like the first time in months. Karen screamed through the back window of a patrol car that this wasn't the end. Maybe she believed it. Maybe people like her have to. 2 days later, she skipped bail. House locked A for sale signs sprouted from her lawn like a weed, and rumors flew she'd left the state she'd holed up with a cousin she was hiding on some back road, planning a comeback. Then the tow yard called me about something they found bolted up under the driver's seat of that impounded SUV. A small metal box with forged insurance forms, printed threats with my name on them, and a flash drive. On my computer, the drive opened a gallery of her own arrogance videos where she bragged about the fires, about the tow of my sedan, about framing me while I played Boy Scout with the cameras. I turned it all over. A warrant went out with her face on the evening news, and slowly the neighborhood exhaled. Kids rode bikes again. George brought lemonade to my porch and said, "You didn't just beat a bully, you reminded the rest of us we didn't have to live scared." I wanted to believe that was the ending. But endings in real life have a way of slipping open. A week later, another letter slid under my door. Same red ink. 5 words. "This isn't over, Mark." My hands shook just a little. I stood there in the quiet house with my daughter snoring on my shoulder and understood something I should have known from the start. People like Karen don't apologize, they hibernate. They wait for a moment to crack. Maybe she'll turn up in handcuffs tomorrow. Maybe she'll vanish for good. Or maybe somewhere down the line the tires will screech again. So tell me, what would you have done? Tow the car on day one, or keep playing nice until the hospital clock ran out? Was the HOA ever about community here, or just a shield for someone who loved power more than people? Where's the line between defending what's yours and becoming the very thing you're fighting? Drop your take in the comments. Who was right, who was wrong, what justice looks like when it's your driveway on the line, and if you've ever dealt with a neighborhood bully. Hit share so someone else knows they don't have to put up with it, because trust me, the minute you start keeping receipts, the story changes.